Okay, so in this video I'm going to explain you the useRef hook. Okay, so this is a hook where you seldom use in your React app, but most people have some confusion in understanding it. So I decided that I'll make a video for this. Okay, so first of all, this useRef hook is basically used for three main cases. Number one is to grab the input DOM element from your HTML, right? So whatever element you use to select the element using get element by ID, and then get the reference to the DOM element and do some manipulations to it, right, using JavaScript. But here you can just do this using the useRef hook. So I'll just be explaining you that in this example, and followed by that is another example where you can get the previous state of your current state of your current component that you are working on, right? So you don't have any way to access your previous state. So using this useRef hook you can be able to achieve that. So let's go ahead one by one. And the third main use case is to avoid any kind of re-renders within your application. So if any kind of state changes in your app, so you do not want that component to re-render, so for that you use the useRef hook. Okay, so keep these three things in mind. So let's understand this by an example. So I'm first of all going to import the useRef hook from React. Okay, so this is going to be a named export, so you need to import it like this, just like how you would for the use state. So useRef like this. Okay, so now let's create a variable const. I'm going to call this input ref, because I'm going to take the reference of an input element from our JSX. Okay, so not like this, input. Okay, and call the useRef function, and the initial value is going to be whatever the input is going to be. Okay, so for this, since we are just grabbing the DOM element, we don't have to pass in an initial value. So instead we can call this input ref like this. And now let's create our form right here. So I'm just going to replace this with a form, a HTML form, and on submit we are just going to call a function to submit. Okay, very simple, on submit. And I'm going to call a function called on submit. Okay, so now let's create a input element. Okay, so for this I'm going to give a label. Okay, so let's give a name, and within that I'm going to give a label of name, and right below that I'm going to give a input element. Okay, so this is going to be a type text, and we just need to give a prop of ref. Okay, so this ref is going to be the input ref that we actually defined over here using the useRef hook. Okay, so this will create a reference to the input, and we can do certain manipulations with this, just like you would in vanilla JavaScript, like get element by ID, right? So it's similar to that. And let's right now right below this give a button, and this is going to be a type of submit, and let's give submit like this. Okay, so now let's go ahead and create the submit function right here, const on submit. So this is going to take the event parameter, and I'm going to prevent the default behavior of the browser, that is to submitting to a page. So that is e.prevent default. So now right below this I'm going to get the reference of the input. Okay, so we can get that by first of all, let me just log to the console and show you what does this actually return us. So the input ref like this, so this should be prevent default. Okay, so now let's have a look at what do we get. So you see a simple form right here that we created. So if I click on submit, you see that it returns us an object with a property called current. Okay, so this actually contains the input DOM element. Okay, so if I just uh, type this as input ref dot current, and let's see what do we get. So if I clear my console and hit submit, you see that we get a input, you get a reference to our DOM element, just like you would in a get element by ID. Okay, so we can do any kinds of things using this DOM element, like you can just focus on the input, you can change the background color or give some styling or whatever you want to do with it. Okay, so let's do a small experiment and see what we can do. So what I can do now is I can just set the value of this input to anything. So we can access that by using the input.current.value and set that to anything. Let's say something like hello. Okay, and just get rid of this console log, and now if I click on submit, we should see hello in our input value. Okay, so if I click on submit, it says that hello is not defined, so it should be in the form of a string, right? So if I clear my console and hit submit, you see that our input element is populated by the word hello. Okay, so this is how you can just play around with it. So you can also give a style to it. So input ref, probably I can just copy this, and I can just give some style to it. So style dot background color, and set this to red or blue, anything. So if I click on submit, you see that the background color is changed to blue and the text is changed to hello. Okay, so this is how you can just play around with your DOM elements, just like you would using vanilla JavaScript. Okay, so this is just one case. So also if I want, if I click on any button, let's say it has to focus on this input element. Okay, so just like here, and for that I can just create another button here, like duplicate this probably, and call this focus, and I can give a ref of this to the input ref like this. Okay, so basically not like this. If I click on this button, it should call a function, so that will actually focus on the input. So on click, okay, so this is basically a function which is just simply going to take the input ref dot current dot focus. Okay, so this has a method called focus which will focus on the input element, so like this. So now if I just temporarily comment this submit button out, or I can just leave it as it is. So if I just take this focus down this, so let me just wrap this in fragments like this. Okay, so now let's have a look. So if I click on focus, it should focus on the input element like this. Okay, so this is how you can do some down manipulations by grabbing the input reference from our JSX. Okay, so this is one use case of the useRef hook. All right, so now let's check the another example of this to get the previous state of our component. So this is another example to demonstrate the useRef hook for getting the previous input state of our application or our component. So for that, let's create a variable over here called the number of renders the application has made. So render, and set this to useRef. Okay, so just like that. So initially the value is just going to be 1, because the component will render once the component mounts on the screen. Okay, so let's create a use effect hook right below this. So use effect, and this is, I'm not going to give any dependencies, which means that for any change I make in the component is going to re-render, right? So let's pass in a function like this. Okay, so now this is just going to increase the value of this render. Okay, so we have the property of current, right? Remember that. So render dot current to grab the actual value of it, so that is going to be the render dot current. So whatever value we have set over here, we are just going to increment that by 1. Okay, so for every change we make in this component, it's going to increment that by 1. I hope that's clear. So now let's create a simple input element which actually updates the state of our component. So let's create a state for that. So I'm going to give this a state of name, and set name, and set this to useState, and the initial value is going to be an empty string. And so now let's create a form over here, and on submit is just going to prevent the default browser behavior. So on submit, and set that to a function which takes in the event parameter, and just we are going to prevent the default behavior, prevent default. Okay, so within that, let's give a input. Okay, and it's going to be of type text, and the value is going to be the name. Okay, just like you were doing it previously. So value is going to be the name, and whenever it changes, we are going to set the value of the name. So on change, like that. Okay, so now we can also give a we can just print out the value of this renders. Okay, so number of times the our component has rendered, so we can probably give this a h3 tag and call this renders and set this to a value of um, that is render. Okay, so render dot current. Okay, and now we can just test this out if we are able to get the number of renders that we have within our component. Okay, you see I just mounted the component to my screen, and the number of renders it's showing as 1. So if whatever the value I type in, so it is going to increment this renders by the use effect hook that we set, right, without any dependency array. So whatever change we make, it is going to re-render. So if I just type in anything, so it is going to re-render that many number of times that we type. Okay, so so this is how we can get the number of re-renders. So now the main purpose of this example is to actually get the previous state of our application. Okay, so for that we can just create another piece of state that is to get the previous name. Okay, so let's say I just type in like a over here. Okay, so the previous state was just an empty string of this input element. Okay, so if I just type in v, so the previous state is just going to be a. Okay, so that is how we can persist the state between renders using the useRef hook. Okay, so let me just demonstrate you that. So let's now create another variable here called as the previous state or the previous name that we set. Okay, and set this to useRef. Okay, and the initial value is going to be an empty string. So whenever our component changes or re-renders, it is just going to get the previous name, okay, by the value called previous name dot current. Okay, so prev name dot current. Okay, so that is going to be the name. Okay, so this variable here. Okay, so let's also print that out on the screen. So probably a paragraph tag, and now we can pass in the previous name or previous state like this and set that to the previous name. Okay, so now let's check what do we get. Okay, so this should be dot current. Okay, so don't forget this. So this is how you can get the previous value, so that you can preserve the state of the previous render, and you can just display them. Okay, so we get an error here. So I just had to refresh the page, so that was the error that was showing before we actually completed our code. So now if I just type in a, since the previous state was nothing, it was just just showing a. Okay, so it's going to be an empty string. Also once I type in b, it is going to print out a. So a is our previous state. So this is how you can persist state across renders using the useRef hook. Okay, so if I type in c d e, so it is going to always show you the previous state like this. Okay, so I hope you understood right now how you can get the previous state using the useRef hook. Okay, so you might notice one thing, right? So if I just refresh the page and if I just type in a word, so it is going to render 2 times. Okay, so that is because I am using this react.strict mode. Okay, so if I just remove this, so it is just going to render once. Okay, so if I just show you that, you see that it is now just going to render 1 time. Okay, so the strict mode is basically going to check multiple times and going to re-render your component. So that is just another feature in like React app whichever you're building. Okay, so if you just remove that, you won't get another re-render. So that was the reason why you are getting like multiple renders over here. So I hope you got to know like how you can get the previous state and like the main use case of the useRef hook. Okay, so that's it I guess for this video, guys. So if you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. So thanks for watching. If you haven't yet subscribed and like this video, please go ahead and do that, so for some more valuable content just like this. So I just make these videos just for something unique and not out there on the internet. Through my understanding explanation, I just share it to you. So if this finds you helpful, so please sure you subscribe to this, and I'll see you in the next video.